Thanks to Fence Armor for sponsoring today's video. Hi guys, welcome to my workshop. I'm in the process of turning this Tuff shed into my dream workshop. In the last couple of videos, I shared how to insulate, hang drywall, and install a mini split. In this video, I'm going to walk you through how to install tongue and groove board on the ceiling. This tutorial also applies if you're installing tongue and groove board on your walls. This is the lumber that we're using. It has a beadboard pattern on one side, or you could also use the flat side. The flat side does have a beveled corner, but they do make tongue and groove boards with a square 90-degree edge, which looks really crisp. We installed that style in my parents' vacation rental last summer. We're sticking with the beadboard pattern. I think it goes with the cottage style that we're going for in here. We ordered our boards from Home Depot. These are about 5.5 inches wide by 12 feet long. We had the boards shipped right to the house, which was convenient, but we ended up having to exchange and hand pick about a third of the boards because they were either too bowed or discolored or damaged, so keep that in mind when ordering material. You can find the links to the tools and materials that we used in the description below. Let's install some tongue and groove board. There are a few things to consider before you start installing the boards. First, make sure that your insulation, electrical, and plumbing are all finished. If you need to add any additional blocking, now is the time to do it. Pay close attention to where your boards will hit the ends at the adjacent walls. We had to add some blocking here at the gable ends. We also had to add some extra blocking around the light fixtures. We rented a scaffold for the week, which was a huge help. This is definitely a two-person job, especially if you're using long 12-foot boards like us. You'll want to set up a cut station. We used a miter saw for end cuts, a table saw to rip down the first and last rows, and a jigsaw to cut out around electrical fixtures. To install the boards, we each had a brad nailer with 1.5-inch brad nails. We had a rubber mallet and small scrap pieces of board to pound the boards into place without damaging the tongue. Once again, you can find the link to the tools that we used in the description below. First step is to measure out your rows and rip the first board down accordingly. Measure the entire side from the bottom to the top and calculate how many rows you'll need. You may need to rip down your first row so that you don't end up with a tiny sliver of a row at the peak or at the other end of your ceiling. We had to rip down our first row to about 3 inches. Here we made sure to cut off the grooved edge and not the tongue edge. Next, we snapped a line level with the center peak of the ceiling as a guide for our first row. If the first row is crooked, then you'll end up running into issues as you install the rest of the boards. We secured one nail on the bottom face of the board and one nail angled in the top tongue part of the board on every truss for this first row. To determine the length of the board, you need to measure to the center of your stud or truss so that each end of the board has something to secure a nail into. Before cutting your boards, check to make sure it's not extremely bowed or damaged. These boards will be near impossible to install or may create large gaps that aren't uniform with the rest of the boards. Be sure to square cut each end of the board before installing it. We decided to just square cut our boards, but you could also bevel your cut so that the end of your boards overlap and they create a really nice tight seam. Cut different board lengths each row so that all your seams are staggered, but try and use as much of the board as possible to avoid waste. You'll want to secure brad nails angled at the tongue of the board here. Once you place the next board on top, the nails will be hidden. Took some effort to get the longer boards in place. A lot of times just tapping the top of the board with a rubber mallet did the trick. If we needed to use more force, we used a hammer and a small scrap piece of board to pound the board into place. We only used one brad nail in the tongue at every truss. Sometimes we secured a few extra brad nails on the face of a stubborn bowed board if it needed some extra holding power. I'd like to take a quick break to thank Fence Armor for sponsoring today's video. A few months ago, I used Fence Armor's lineup of products to protect the posts of our AC fence cover. Our fence is holding up great. I love that we don't have to worry about our lawn equipment damaging the bottom of the posts. Now it's time to protect the posts of our vinyl fence. We had this fence installed when we moved into this house a few years ago. I'm already noticing some scratches and damaged corners from the weed whacker, so let's get these posts protected. Here I'm using the Fence Armor Demi Protection on each of my posts. They recommend installing these about an inch above the ground line for best results. Vinyl fences have a thin UV layer made of titanium dioxide, and once it wears out, it can lead to the degradation of PVC. The Demi Protection used in this video, installed an inch to an inch and a half off the ground, will safeguard the UV protection. Vinyl is prone to cracking in cold temperatures like you see in this picture. The crack in this vinyl post was fixed using a pressure-treated 2x as well as the Fence Armor post guards. The Demi post protectors are also suitable for corners. They overlap like you see here. When vinyl fences are hit with weed trimmers, they tend to turn to chalk due to their thin walls, and certain filaments in weed trimmers have colors like black, orange, or green, which can leave marks on the vinyl. Fence Armor being washable, you can easily remove the marks with a soapy towel. They have all sorts of colors and sizes available on their website. I will link these Fence Armor Demi post protectors below. You can use code Stephanie12 for a 12% discount on your Fence Armor purchases. Once you get to a recessed light or electrical box, use your jigsaw to cut out the fixture. Cut the board to length first, dry fit it in place, and then measure and mark out where the fixture is. I used a paint can to trace a perfect circle, which is the same size as our recessed lighting. Using a jigsaw, I cut the circle out, and then on the back of the board, I cut more of the groove so that it was easier to slide the board into place. We left a few rows open on the first side because we still need to install some mounts for our pendant fixtures at the peak. On the other side of the ceiling, we follow the same steps. If your ceiling isn't vaulted like ours, you can just continue with your tongue and groove pattern. We took a measurement to the peak and then ripped down the first row accordingly. We snapped a level chalk line for our first row and then worked our way towards the peak just like before. We have a vaulted ceiling and we'll be hanging pendant lights from the center of the vault, so we installed these special mounts which I found on Amazon. These straddle the ceiling trusses and screw right into the 2x. The center pendant needs to be hung in between 2 ceiling trusses, and so we had to cut some extra blocking to get the spacing that we needed. After the mounts were installed, we had to add some blocking around them so that we had something to secure the tongue and groove board to. We kept installing the boards towards the peak until we had 2 rows left, 1 row on each side. It took a bit of trial and error to figure out the angles at the peak. We ended up straight cutting one side of the tongue and groove board and then ripped down the other side at an angle to create a seamless transition. That is all on how to install tongue and groove board. Thank you guys for watching. In the next video, I'm going to be doing a whitewash treatment and finishing off the ceiling with some polyurethane, so stay tuned for that.